I am Jerry Candelario.
I am Jasmine Creighton.
APIT is proud to present My Wellness Journey Starts With Me, a visibility campaign to raise awareness about the importance of mental health and wellness in the LGBTQ2 spirit community.
We have assembled a talented group of social influencers who will share their experiences and their personal philosophies on their journey to wellness.
Through one-on-one interviews, they were able to share their thoughts on the COVID-19 pandemic, racial inequality, and the movements Black Lives Matter and Stop Asian Hate.
These interviews are meant to spark dialogue and increase awareness to address our community's well-being. Here's the interview featuring the incomparable Laverne Cox with our very own board member, Dr. James Simmons.
All right, so a little I guess level setting, like, I'm glad that you were just talking about how you just came out of therapy, right? And like love talking about mental health. And one of the things I was listening to, I had kind of caught up a bit. I'm listening to your last episode of the last season before your hiatus of the Laverne Cox show with you and TS. And it's always a gag with Maddie, right? And
always.
You said something really interesting during that time that you're pulling back. There were a lot of interesting things in that conversation, but you said something during that time that was really striking to me about, and in thinking about our conversation today about mental health, about pulling back a little bit and saying no to more things. And my first question for you was going to be, what have you learned during the pandemic? And that seems like one of them for sure. I was wondering if I think we could all use that, like learning how to say no more.
I've known about the power of no for a long time. It's funny because for a long time I said yes to everything, and because I just wanted opportunities and I wanted to be successful and I knew I needed to work harder than everybody else. And after a while, when of saying yes, yes, yes for years, and then some success coming, and then all of a sudden you're even in more demand, that yes becomes overwhelming. It becomes too much. It can become too much too fast too soon, basically. And my therapist calls that trauma: too much too fast too soon. So the no is about, it's about self-care. It's about curating more what I want my life to be. Where I just came out of a therapy session. I was just like, how do I take the reins of my life even more now? What does that look like now more for me? I don't know what my next action job is going to be. So this is a kind of a great opportunity for me to kind of really even hone in more on who I am, hone in more on my self-care and devising some sort of plan. It's hard in show business to make plans. It really is. It's hard because we don't know which show is going to get picked up. We don't know which project is going to get funding first. And so we put a lot of, plant a lot of seeds and they come to fruition in different points. And so it's just like, how do I don't have a series right now. So it's a good time to kind of, you know, amp up like um mental health for me and self-care for me is really about like, how do I have where I'm at now is how do I have control over my life and manifest being the woman I really want to be in the world and with myself more importantly. I think during the pandemic, like my relationship with myself, because I was spending so much time alone, I like really had to get even more clear about that and more it was hard. I mean, it was really hard because the beautiful thing about the pandemic is that when things went virtual, I literally, I think I missed maybe 3 weeks of therapy just because it was the holidays. It was the Christmas and Hanukkah and all that stuff. So I think I missed maybe 3 weeks of not having therapy, but every week, Jennifer and I sat down, Jennifer Burton Flyer, my therapist, we sat down via Zoom every week and hashed stuff out. And it got really messy. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, I noted, I was like, okay, this is a spiritual opportunity. That was like the, positive part of it. But then I was just like, I realized how hard I am on myself, how when I'm alone with my thoughts, how brutally awful I can be to myself. How when I am left to my own devices, my default is to beat myself up, to be self-critical in ways that's not useful. I think part of that's being trans. I think part of it's being Black, and part of it coming from a working class background. I think the trans piece is like, when I transitioned, started my medical transition in 1998, I met a lot of knew a lot of trans girls and met a lot of trans girls who were like, you're not passable enough, you're not cunt, you bleep that if you need to, you're not fish enough, you're not whatever enough. And I internalized all that. I internalized all of this, like, I'm not enough, right? And then I had a history of growing up and being told I'm not enough by my mother, by my,
Well,
by
and
my teachers.
just being Black and working
Being
with that.
Black and being
right.
Black. And then like there's this all of this, like, in trans communities too, there's like, as racism, and there's like internalized transphobia, and there's all these things that I have taken on, and it adds up to me being not being enough, and then me needing to sort of shape shift and change this and just beat myself up because I'm not something. And I thought I'd gotten better with all that stuff, but when I am alone with my thoughts, it just creeps back in because it's a default. And so then in the face of that, and after 20 plus years of therapy, it's like, what is the work now that I have to do to address this? And my therapist for years was talking to me about Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion. So there's an attachment theory piece and there's the self-compassion piece. And the beautiful thing is, coming up on my Laverne Cox show, is I interviewed Kristen Neff about self-compassion. And I interviewed Dr. Wendy Walsh on my podcast. We've done both actually, and about attachment theory. So a lot of it is about, so when I'm all alone by myself, it kind of like my anxious attachment just like comes up, just this whole, and attachment theory, but like, I'm assuming, yes. And I want to assume.
I mean, I think it might be really nice for the people watching this interview to sort of hear, like, particularly in your words, like what attachment theory, because I think that there's something that a lot of us brown queer folk really struggle with that maybe a lot of people don't necessarily know about.
Attachment theory is a theory in sort of psychology, and I'm not an expert on it. That's why I've talked to experts, and I'm just learning about how it affects me and my relationships. Is basically when we're born, from about the age of birth to 3 to 5 years old, we often develop an attachment style based on how our parents are loving or not loving. And basically, secure attachment is when someone leaves, when a parent leaves, when a loved one leaves, they're coming back. And if there is a relationship with a primary caregiver from the ages of birth to 3 years old, when we don't know they're coming back, there's this crazy experiment that my therapist showed me it's on YouTube, and I don't know, you wouldn't even know how to tell you how to look it up. But it's basically like, a parent is with their child and they're, playing with the kid and everything's lovely. And then the parent like leaves and then turns away. And the kid is like trying to get the parent's attention, and the parent ignores them, and they're trying to get the attention. And then the kid just starts screaming, trying to get the parent's attention. Oh my God, it's so devastating. Every time I watch it, I start crying. And then and the parent is ignoring the kid, and the kid's just like, please. And the kid becomes so distressed in that moment. And it's like really hard to watch. And then eventually the parent turns around and then like takes the kid, and it's like, and the kid knows that the parent is there again. But like in those formative years, when we don't know if our parent is coming back, it can form an anxious attachment or an avoidant attachment. I think anxious, avoidant, and secure, and I think there's one other attachment style that I can think of it at the time. And for me, most of my life, it's been avoidant or it's been anxious, and it's played out in relationships mostly with men, but it plays out with friends, it plays out professionally. And those attachment styles, I think for me, the anxious attachment is someone who's kind of anxious or avoidant, right? And then like I am an introvert, and being around people drains me and creates anxiety when I'm around people. Often being alone and having an anxious, it just kind of like, it's what in the beginning it wasn't healthy. Like after the 21st day of pandemic, and I was terrified. It's funny because the mental health check-in we did a year ago, March 13th, 2020, was the last thing I did before lockdown.
Wow. Yeah.
And at week 3, I woke up in the middle of the night with panic attacks because I had not left my apartment. I live in a condo in LA, and we were terrified. We didn't know if you could touch things, if it was lingering in the air. There's so much we didn't know.
Right.
And I had to go to the roof of my building and like just breathe without a mask on. And like at 2 in the morning, I couldn't breathe. And then I got used to being by myself. Then I got used to it, and it got really easy, and I was loving it. And I
And then
still
maybe
kind of
too
loving
easy,
it.
right?
What?
Then maybe too easy, right? Too easy to be by yourself.
Too easy. And if for someone who has some anxious attachment and some avoidant attachment, right, in terms of intimacy, in terms of, attaching to someone, it's tricky. And then I had to confront a lot of stuff. And then in the relationship between my physical health and mental health, I've always known that they're linked, but like it's especially I think as I get older, like I have to move and work out because that's linked to my mental health too.
Sure.
And then the piece of self-compassion, the beating myself up thing, like I have to like cultivate self-compassion in the way that Kristen Neff talks about that. It's like the compassion that when someone is struggling, like if a friend of mine is struggling, I would comfort her and I would say, it's going to be okay. And you've got this, and you're awesome, and you're amazing. And
we have to be able to do that for ourselves, right? We really have to.
And it sounds really simple, but what keeps us from doing it, the thing that gets in the way for me personally, is I don't deserve it. I haven't earned it. And it's it's trauma. It's trauma of like it. If I beat myself up, then I can preempt. It's linked for me to trauma in the survival response too, because my beating myself up is linked to, as a person, I think as a person of color, if I can be growing up being bullied too, if I can preempt what people are going to say that's negative, right? So me beating myself up is about trying to cut off vulnerability, trauma, criticism at the past, right? So like if I can be impeccable, if I can like, get every single flaw with myself and get that under control, then like I'm not going to be targeted.
And they'll have nothing.
And they'll have nothing. And it's about trauma. Really, it's about trauma and survival. And so me being self-compassionate to myself, I have to create a certain level of safety within myself. I have to feel safe and at home and even in the streets. Like a lot of my not feeling safe publicly is just, I'm sure I talked about this last year. And as a trans woman of color, it's like the streets aren't safe for us, right? And I'm Black.
Exactly.
It's like, really?
Right.
But then something happened last year that reinforced it. I was in, I talked about this, and I don't want to talk too much about it because it's still really raw. It was November 3rd. It was the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I was in Griffith Park, walking with a friend, and like, this guy, we walked past this guy, and then we heard the guy say, he asked for the time. My friend told him the time, and then as we turned away, the guy says, "Guy or girl?" to my friend in reference to me, and my friend said, "Fuck off." And then the guy like goes to hit my friend, and then my friend like goes to hit him, and then it was a thing, and it happened really quickly, and it was so triggering because just like physical confrontations are like my worst nightmare. I grew up with being just attacked on a daily basis, physically, verbally. I've been attacked publicly before. And it's still raw. Yeah, I'm feeling like I got to a point, I did an Instagram live about it, and then I talked about it in maybe one interview, and then I realized I couldn't talk about it anymore. Because it's too, there's just a long history. And so having a trauma-based approach to my own therapeutic process is really important to just having compassion for myself, right? And setting boundaries that certain things I can't talk about. And then like, how do I allow myself to feel it, because you have to feel it to heal it, but it should also be it shouldn't be an ordeal to heal. So allowing myself to feel the trauma of that like that moment I was protected, the resilient things, the good things. There's that moment I was with my friend and he literally put his body between me and this other person, which is so beautiful.
And so many people that you're speaking to right now haven't had that, right? Haven't
Yeah.
They've been in those situations, and I love that you couched that in fortune. You were fortunate at that time to have someone who was willing to physically, that being
Like
one of the things.
literally that's what he did.
Mhm.
And even instinctively, that was his instinct, that he was like, well, I knew I needed to like and he literally just stood between me and this guy and like, that was intense. So it's a beautiful thing. But it's just a whole lifetime. And again, it's just a whole lifetime of like walking down the street and just my transness being a thing, my gender nonconformity being a thing that can get me killed. And it's just like that. It's just a horrible thing to live with. And like, that is like, and I'm fucking Laverne Cox and I'm famous and I'm like all the things, right? All the resume shit, you know? And this is still like a reality. I don't even know what to do with that. Like, I'm just like, if this is the reality for me, like what about my sisters? You know, what about my trans siblings out there who don't have the protection and the privilege that I have? It's a sorry state of the fucking world that this is like, it's just, I don't even, it's just.
Well, that's the very first thing you can do right there, and I'm sure your therapist has talked about this, is when these come up, is breathe, right? Always reconnect to that breath. In that moment right now, all of that time, reconnect to that breath. And is this something that your therapists and you have been able to start talking about?
Breathing. Oh, yeah, I've talked to my therapist at length about this. It's just publicly that it's too much.
Sure.
Breathing, and for us, resourcing. And I know I talked about the community resiliency model last year, but resourcing, like getting a bunch of resources. It's breathing, it's gesturing, it's like literally in this moment, grounding. So I'm feeling my feet on the floor right now. I'm feeling my butt in this chair to ground myself in this moment, because when I'm triggered, like the trigger for me is like, it's that incident, but it's also like all the other ones. When it's hysterical, it's historical.
Yeah.
So it's not just when I'm hysterical about something, it's often not about just about the moment that is happening. It is about the kid. It's about the kid who did not have the protection, right? The kid being held down and kicked by like 6 people, or the kid, all the things that happened when I was a child. So I have to get present, right? So even in this moment, when I thought about that kid, it's like, okay, that's historical for me. That's like not fully processed trauma. And I think that's the thing, that's where I'm not fully at yet. Processing all this trauma is still too much for my nervous system, right? So there's a lot of childhood stuff I haven't been able to delve into with my therapist yet, because it's too charged, it's too deep, it's too triggering. It would just like feel like re-traumatizing, right? So we are taking things in pieces in terms of the historical processing, so that I don't get flooded with the thing. It's flooding, and then like there's another, Christian Neff has another term for it that's similar to when you're flooded, when the stuff comes up. So we're taking it slow with all that, right? And
Which I think is something that's so important for everyone to hear, because I think even just that might be a barrier for some people, particularly again, people of color, Black people, queer people, trans folks, non-binary, et cetera, all of us, that sometimes we can't take that first step into mental health, even into just examining where we are, because we know we have all of this behind us that's going to come. And to hear you say, even as Laverne Cox, even as someone who has been in counseling for a very long time, there's some stuff that we're just not there yet, but that you can still make progress, I think is so important for people to hear.
And get clear that that is historical stuff, and that in this moment, for the most part, I am safe. And I think that's the biggest piece for me with like the trauma resilience work, is to do the things to get me present. I literally just ended my session with something that not Jennifer said, but Carolyn Ehrlich said to me, and that I probably said last year, is that my work is to be present, curious, and non-judgmental. If I'm ruminating on the past, I'm not living in reality. If I'm making a positive or negative prediction of the future, I'm not in reality. If I'm reading people's minds, I'm not in reality. My work is to stay present, curious, and non-judgmental. So in this present moment, there's this beautiful view that I'm looking at, and I'm like, this is my New York dream view, you know, and my man loves me, and I look kind of cute, even though I don't have any makeup, with this Zoom filter that I'm living for. Thank you, Zoom, for the filters. In this
Like,
moment,
wait a minute, I need a filter too.
yeah, that's right. In this moment, I'm safe. In this moment, everything's okay. Yes, in the past, things were rough, and that lives in my body in a really specific, substantial way. That um, the trauma lives in my body, but in this moment, I can ground myself. I can ground myself. I can gesture. There's gestures I do. We can do some tapping. I can do that. There's some things to reset my vagus nerve. There's this thing that I'm terrible at that Jennifer does for me, where I do like this thing to kind of reset my vagus nerve.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Excellent.
Right, doing it right. But there are things I can do to get me in the moment and like regulate my nervous system, right? Because when I'm bumped out of my resilience zone into high zone and into survival, it's just the nervous system is like it's it's a beautiful thing that where our nervous systems are set up to like, when we feel a threat, that like we can like, you know, release some cortisol and adrenaline and like fight that thing or flee. Like it's a great thing, but it's not, we're not supposed to be always in that heightened state. And like the advanced stuff that I'm doing, it feels advanced with my therapist, is like, as we track what's going on in our bodies, because we have to know to be able to regulate it, it's like, what is the granularity of tracking, right? Because I can be in my resilient zone, but at the high end of my resilient zone, where I might have to like be a little ramped up to like for a workout or to just, you know, get myself out of bed. There's a little ramping that doesn't have to tilt over into that fight, flight, or freeze, right? And so there's gradations of and granularity of tracking and
But
getting
within, right? Without.
within resilience, yeah, without being in low zone or high zone. So these are the things that I'm working on too. That it's a lot of work, you know. It's like
It,
it is.
it is a lot of work. But I think this
It's
is
endless, and it's endless.
brilliant. It is, because you've sort of talked about some things that were, and not only the experience at Griffith Park, but other things in your life that happened during the pandemic that were negative, but then also you so sort of seamlessly transitioned into positives. And I sort of like, are some of the, it seems so weird to say, okay, after 2020, what are the positives that we take out of this year? But particularly in terms of your mental health, but like, what are some of the positives that happened to you in this last calendar year since we talked?
Well, I just want to say that that's the thing. That's the thing of the both and the shift and stay of the community resiliency model. That's the thing of our mental health, that we need to be able to hold two potentially contradictory ideas at once, the both and. So as challenging as last year was, I had a major health thing. I had to make some major decisions about my health last year that were really, really hard. Um, but the good thing is that I'm feeling better as a result of that. um I you know getting having to step up my mental health, like having to like step up like my, and you know, this, years ago I heard some, the bigger your life gets, the bigger your sort of self-care, resiliency, recovery, what, you know, bigger your process has to be to like accommodate that.
Sure.
And I'm really trying to step up to that, and I've been taking concrete actions to take better care of myself and to like express self-love in how I treat myself. And it's progress, not perfection. It's not perfect, but it's better, and I'm getting more information. And for me, it's like, not as a smarty pants, as someone who like, you know, can talk a good game about mental health. I can talk, you know, obviously I can talk We can talk attachment theory, trauma resilience. We can talk, self-compassion. We can talk mindfulness. We can talk, transcendental meditation. I can talk, but
Right.
it's like, what does it look like? What does it mean for me to slow it all down and to fucking live it, and to be about it. Morpheus in the first Matrix movie says to Neo, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking it. So
Mm.
how do I walk the path every day? And that is, I have to slow myself down and still, and like, what I love about New York is that there's so much energy here that like it's motivating and it ramps me up a little bit. And I'm like, yeah. But then I also have to like slow myself down. So like what's the balance of that where I'm like motivated and energetic and excited, but then not like bumped out of into my resilience zone. So I have to be like being able to be in constant dialogue with myself. I have to, a lot of it is about being in constant dialogue with myself and being in quarantine a lot and being with my own thoughts. It's like, do I check out? And there were a lot of moments when I checked out. I watched a lot of Netflix. I went a year and a half of not eating sugar, and I like started eating sugar again last July, like, and
Wow.
drinking on sugar. And sugar's not good for me in a lot of ways. And
Mm.
so I check out. So like, there was some checking out, there was some numbing, but then there was a lot of me having conversations with myself, journaling, like I read a lot, and like the podcast has been so great because I get to my therapist told me about that attached book like 5 years ago, and I can read it.
Yeah,
So
just now getting to it, right? Right.
I had you for the podcast. Though. I was like, okay, I'm gonna
Right.
have the attachment theory lady on, so like we need to read the book.
Maybe I
So
should.
so it's good. So having a job where I have to like learn this stuff and then like try to internalize it as well and try to have it be embodied.
Mm.
The thing about all of this mental health work and the somatic piece of it is that it has to be embodied. That's another thing, the difference between talking the talk and walking the walk, that it has to be embodied. It has to
Mm.
hit in our nervous systems, in our bodies, right? To make an effect, just to really have healing happen. Because the trauma is working on us all the time. Our nervous systems and our bodies are like 80%, I think 80% of the information that we get comes from body up to our minds, and 20% comes from our minds to our bodies. So the experience of what is happening in our bodies is way more important than what's happening here. So we have to have the experience of the resilience, right? And Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this beautifully. And I don't know if I'm making it on my podcast or not, but we have to reset our nervous systems and like overcome the trauma stuff. We have to have in events in our lives that are, I mean, that's the piece of the attachment theory piece, right? That we can heal the anxious and avoidant attachment, like the styles from like our childhood with healing relationships. Dr. Wendy Walsh talks about like, for between parents and children, right? The soothing things that a parent can say to their child, then like they begin to say those things to themselves, right? That we, through having a child, we can heal our attachment issues through healthy relationships, romantic relationships. We can begin to heal that. And it's really, I have to say how beautiful it is for me to be able to be in a romantic relationship and not be ramped up into like, oh my God, he loves me, he's gonna leave me. Like, and really feel like a
Ooh,
secure
baby,
attachment with another person. That is
that is
huge.
a thing.
And so these things can be healed, and that's something that you feel and hear. This is not intellect. This is something that you feel that has to happen in relationship with someone. But then the relationship between therapist and patient can also
Mm.
heal those attachment issues, right? And I think for a lot of trans folks, I mean, I could talk a lot with my girlfriends about dating and relationships, and for trans women who date men, it is a mess out there. It is like, it is
Yes.
like, it's a shit show. It is a
Yes.
full shit show. It's a whole mess. But like having wonderful relationships with women and with friends and with my girlfriends, we've formed, there's something so healing about it. I could cry because it's like I don't have to be in this trauma and feeling abandoned. I don't have to feel abandoned anymore. Because like
Mm.
is I also, one of the things I learned in therapy is that adults cannot be abandoned. So when I'm feeling abandoned, it's about that, 3-year-old. It's about that 8-year-old who was literally abandoned, right? And felt abandoned and
Mm.
for a lot of reasons that I don't talk about publicly. But that stuff can be healed in healthy, securely attached relationships. That relationship with a therapist and a patient, friends, family's trickier. Like your family maybe has to be doing their own work. You
Mhm.
know, some people
Family
have
is
great
very,
relationships with their families, but a lot of us, especially like LGBTQ plus people of color, trans people of color, our familiar relationships are deeply traumatizing often, not always. And so those might not be the places we need to go. And we may need to like create some boundaries there too.
absolutely.
Learning, and for me, learning like even boundaries are just crucial with all this. Like the mental health work, you can't do, none of this is possible without boundaries. None of the work is possible without healthy boundaries with ourselves, with people, being like working all of our, and then to like the codependent work, right? That we make sure that we, whatever addiction stuff, like the mental health piece too. If we are like, I'm a sugar addict, and I'm just gonna say that, you know, here.
Own it.
Stuff is supposed to be anonymous, but like if we're struggling with any kind of addiction, it is like the first order of business is to get sober. The first order of business is to be in some state of abstinence from whatever it is and get sober. Nothing is possible if we are in active addiction.
Mhm.
And that is a huge issue in our community. And maybe I should do a podcast episode about addiction, because this is, for LGBTQ folks, the drugs are, and especially in LA and with my gay male brothers, drug addiction is like it's
It's a
wreaking
thing.
havoc in our
Mhm.
community. It really is. And crystal meth is so addictive. Or the first order of business for mental health is sobriety. It really is. It is the first, and working whatever program you have to work to stay sober. And it really, but it is also, I think, the key to a lot of this too. So many people, Brene Brown talks about this. Her sobriety was the beginning of her really being able to do
Mhm.
intense, serious work on herself so that she can get to the next level.
And that
All of
and
this.
I like how you said that different whatever program works for you, because people think, particularly with alcoholism or narcotics, let's say, people think AA or Narcotics Anonymous. It doesn't have to be that program. It doesn't have to be that type of program, because it's very, you know, AA is very based in spirituality and in God and those particular 12 steps, and that doesn't work for a lot of people. That doesn't mean that
Yeah.
there aren't things out there that don't work for you. So, because you're right, sobriety has to sort of be that level set place from where you get there, and then you can start to do the work, which shouldn't feel, I forgot what you're saying was earlier, it shouldn't be an ordeal
It shouldn't be an ordeal to heal.
to
We
heal.
can't flood, because if the work is if for trauma resilience, so let's just talk about that. If we're trying to regulate our own nervous systems, right, and like not be in a place of being bumped out of our resilient zone constantly, and like drugs and alcohol, sugar, actually our phones, computers, like there's a lot of things to be addicted to now.
Yes.
Shopping, online everything, all those things if they're regulating our nervous systems, we are not doing it. So we have
Mhm.
to put the substance down. We have to put the phone down sometimes. We have to put the Netflix down. We love Netflix, but like, whatever it is
Right.
that we are addicted to, we have to put that substance down to
Yep.
be able to. I'm the master of my faith, the captain of my soul. I'm not if I'm addicted to something.
Mm.
I'm just
Mhm.
not. And the mental health piece, I mean, that is, we have to talk about addiction. Like, and I think in our community, we probably need to be talking more about it now. I'm just literally having aha moments about a podcast
Yeah.
episode. I'm not sure if we can
And
talk about this, but
I love that. I think because they really do go hand in hand with that. And you know, you mentioned earlier about, well, a lot about trauma and sort of trauma resiliency, and it got me thinking about the external things that cause us trauma that we are completely not in control of. And so I'm gonna shift you just a little bit,
Mhm.
because I felt like the entire situation that went down with I think it was HB 1500, the bill in Arkansas.
HB 1570.
1570, yeah. Thank you. Traumatizing, right? Like the entire process, and I think even the up and down of that was something that personally felt the most traumatizing. Like literally one day I'm like, Asa Hutchinson vetoed this bill, amazing, and then to
And then
wake up the
yeah,
next morning and everyone is like, did you see, did you see? So I mean, can you sort of talk about like that in terms of trauma, but then also just your general thoughts about, I mean, there are so many anti-trans legislations of different sorts throughout the country right now.
I think the mental health piece of it is, for me personally, is because there was a minute I was just like, this is too much. Like I hit an activism wall last summer. I think with post George Floyd, post Pride Month, like in July, I was so traumatized. I was traumatized by the pandemic. I was traumatized by seeing another Black man be murdered on camera. I was traumatized by seeing Iana Dior being brutally beaten by like 30 people on camera. I was traumatized by seeing another Malaysia Booker a few years earlier. I was just,
It's too much.
it was way too much. And I just couldn't, I mean, I just like, I went to, yeah, Jasmine was there. I went to a rally. There was a rally, I think it was in 2019, that Jasmine and Maria and everyone, like a bunch of trans women had been murdered that week. And I went, and it was beautiful to be with community at that time. It really was. But I just don't know how you can keep, um, how anyone can keep being in this space of deathlessness, seeing violent murder on camera and not be traumatized by it. So I just had to pull back from my own mental health. I had to pull back from talking about particularly violence against trans people, because I'm like I'm living it. Like I'm unfortunately, it's like when these things happen to my sisters, it's like I'm not an idiot. I know, but for the grace of God, like that could be me. I'm not like delusional. You know, I know that like this can happen to me. And it's just, that's trauma. And so, and for every Black person in America, it's trauma. And for every Black trans, it's so there's that. So for me, the mental health piece is pulling back from it, like being aware of it, but trying to detach, right? So for me, I was in a really codependent relationship from 2001 to 2005, and I did a lot of codependency work afterwards. And the concept of a detachment, just detaching from and not identifying with an event, um, is really crucial for me sometimes. And it's hard for me to not to feel a sense of identification when my community is being attacked, and particularly when it happens to children. It's devastating. So it's a delicate balance of I'm needing to put a little bit of distance between me and the events that are happening. And again, this is not happening to me, even though it is happening, feels like it is because it's my community. I still have access to healthcare. But I also know that these things are tenuous, right? That like if they can take healthcare away from trans kids in Arkansas and possibly my home state of Alabama, then it could probably happen anywhere. And there's not a political will to really do anything about it. So there's the piece of like there's the mental health piece of like doing what I can, right? I did a press conference a few weeks ago with the ACLU, and it felt good to just even virtually feel like I was in community. Doing activism via Zoom is like very isolating. If you feel like you're in community, that helps, I found, for me. Finding a way to have some detachment. And then I think community helps with activism when these things are going on. And then trying to, I can't do everything. I can't respond to every trans injustice because I actually am an actor. Like activism is part of what I do just because I'm a citizen of the world and like I care about these things, but I'm an actor and I'm trying to build a career and a brand and I'm trying to be emotionally healthy. And that is like 24/7. And so it's creating boundaries around it.
Mhm.
That's hard. I mean, I'm like kind of grasping for straws with it because injustice is like, and because there's what I can control though, my perception and my behavior. I can control how I respond to it. I can control how I frame it, right? And in the resilient piece of it, the thing that I go to in myself, in my own nervous system, is the history of what trans folks have been doing for decades, for centuries, with less visibility than we have now, less support than we have now. Trans folks have found ways to have community, to transition, right? We know, unfortunately, like trans folks have been finding a hormone since they've existed, right?
Right.
So trans
Correct.
folks are going to consistently do that. Obviously, like sometimes what we've done to transition through street economies or street, hormones isn't always been the healthiest. So we don't want to go back to that. But trans folks have found a way. We really have. Like
Mhm.
our ancestors have found a way, and they've given us a blueprint, right? So that like we must not get weary because things have been worse, right? Black people were in chains. We had Jim Crow. They're trying to bring us Jim Crow back.
Okay.
But like
Ain't
the
they?
resilient piece, though, the both and in the faith, the mental health. This is for my mental health, but it is also for us having a sense of hope is looking into history and our ancestors, our transcestors, and it's been worse. It
Mhm.
really has.
Mhm.
And so that doesn't mean that it's not terrible. It's not. This shit is fucked up. Like that 2020 is the deadliest year on record for trans people.
For
It's
trans
fucked
people.
up.
Yep.
That is like devastating. That during a pandemic, when people weren't even supposed to be going outside, people still found a way to kill us, right? Like that. That's some shit. Like I don't even know what to do with that. Like I just like, are you? I mean,
And you saying earlier about, I think this is really enlightening that because you being Laverne Cox, there is a sort of an over, I don't know what the right word is, maybe overburdened sense of, well, what is Laverne saying about this? What is Laverne saying about this? What is Laverne doing about this? And
mhm.
but also at the same time, you taking that opportunity to say publicly, even not here, but just otherwise, and before this, I have to pull back. Like I can't respond 100% of the time to 100% of the things that happen, even when they're happening to my community, because it is, when it happens to our community, it does happen to us, and it brings up those traumas and it brings all of those things up, and that to protect our mental health, to be able to do the work, to be able to do the work personally and for the community, you can't take on 100%
There,
100% of the
and,
time.
and I'm not going to be able to be effective. There was a point last year when I was so distraught, when I was so just like it we were in a global pandemic and I was in it and I was dealing with like the trauma of COVID. Like just COVID by itself is traumatizing. And I'm
Mm,
dealing with the trauma of COVID and George Floyd and Trans Lives Matter and all of this at one time. There was no way I was going to be able to go out in the world and not just be pissed, crying, just a mess. Like
angry.
I was a mess, and there was no way. And like that, I don't think that would have been an abuse to anyone. I
Mm,
really don't. And like not that I don't have the right to be messy because I've been messy publicly before. I try not to be, but it happens.
all
But
right.
I I don't think it would have been effective.
Mm,
So and it's a weird thing being an actor, and this is maybe a problem that this is what our culture does. It's like they people have like decided that I'm an actor. Yes, I'm an activist. Yes, I'm more than an actor. I'm a lot of things. I'm
mhm,
I'm
mhm,
trans and I'm divine and I'm anointed and I'm,
mhm,
I'm that
mhm.
bitch and
Thank
all
you.
that shit.
Thank you. Yep, yep. There we go. Right. Use your own words too. Right.
No, these are things that are given to me by my creator. These are not, I'm not. This is not an ego thing. This is like, thank you. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm more than an actor, yes, but like, but yeah, it's just really complicated with someone like me, and I
Yep.
think I'm so. For me, I look to people like Jasmine, and I look to my friend
Mhm.
Chase at the ACLU, and I look to the Bambies of the world, and so these people, I mean, who are activists on the ground in the fight every day, in a way that I'm just not, and these are the folks I listen to and try to listen to and elevate what they're doing and the work they're doing and that that's what I think I really am doing. And then I think I like to offer historical perspective and sense of hope and inspiration. for folks, and elevating issues. That's really like using my platform to elevate and amplify what the fight needs to be. That's really my job in all of this, I think. Probably some
And
other
it,
stuff too, but
and I mean, it doesn't go obviously unappreciated or unnoticed, but it really, I think that's so important that people who do, this is sort of what we talked about last summer when, lots of white folks were coming to us talking about what can I do or what should I do. And part of it is, okay, if you have a platform, if you have power, if you're in a position of power or influence, you have to use that for the greater good. And so you are even just having this conversation with us now. And so we appreciate that. I want to kind of as we wrap up here, because I want to respect your time, I want to give you sort of an opportunity to talk to the kids, if you will. Just this last year was a lot, right? It was a lot on all of us.
mhm.
What do you feel hopeful for going forward, and what do you want sort of the I say the kids, but you know what I mean, everybody to take with them, to sort of, if there's one sort of thing that you can say, all right, we have a little bit of hope, whether it's vaccines, whether it's different legislation, whether it's governors like Asa Hutchinson at least trying, like whatever it is, we can be hopeful going forward. What is that message that you want to give to the kids about going forward?
It's complicated. I mean, we did get the, Asa Hutchinson to veto that bill is huge. It being overridden is devastating. I think it just reminds us of the fight. It reminds us in some ways that we're winning, actually. The fact that the legislative priority of conservatives this legislative session was limiting voting rights and limiting trans children's access to sports and healthcare um, says a lot about their fears, says a lot about the fear that they're trying to use against people, right? I think I always like to remind people they don't really care about girl sports or women's sports, right? They're just using trans people, right? They're just using us to instill fear in folks, right? What can we do to make people scared? That is what the Republican Party has right now. They have cancel culture, they have, stolen elections, and they have like, trans people are coming to,
Right.
ruin our way of life, or whatever they're, and it's fear-based, and it's not about reality, and it's not about love, right? And so I know that my work every day is to love myself more and have that love be reflected in what I do and hopefully how I treat people. That's imperfect. But I have to be about love. And I think that is the work that to know too that we in a lot of ways we are winning, and whenever we're winning there's going to be backlash. This is part of the problem. We talk about this in disclosure. When we have heightened visibility, there's always going to be backlash. That is what we're experiencing right now. And so we have to continue to hopefully push our politicians. I mean, I am hopeful, but I'm also acknowledge that this is a crucial time, right? This is some structural change really has to happen. Like if we were to pass the Equality Act, we would have actually everything that like this Arkansas bill is already illegal. It's already unconstitutional based on the 14th Amendment. It's already unconstitutional based on the Title VII case that the Supreme Court decided last year. All of this is illegal, right? So, and they're going to be sued by the ACLU. So we have to just we mustn't give up hope. We have to know that we're fighting, that we're still fighting, that in many ways we're winning. And the work is to continue to elevate the beautiful humanity of trans folks, that is really our job. I know it's my job, that I cannot go out into the world psychologically, emotionally fucked up. It's my job to be at the highest level possible, mentally, physically, and emotionally, so that I can show up for what my creator has for me. And this is why my mental health is important. This is why your mental health is important, because I'm not special. Like I love Oprah when Oprah talks about this. She's like, when she says, if you think about me, you think about Oprah, like Oprah's good, Oprah's living the dream. But she said that I'm not living the dream because I'm special. I'm living the dream because I answered the call of the dream. And the dream is waiting for you. It is waiting for each and every one of you. You just have to answer the call. It's right there. And so we are, Look reminded me when I interviewed them for my podcast that, trans folks have been spiritual leaders for a very long time. Like just from, since ancient times, trans folks have been spiritual leaders. We are called. We really are. And that we have to internalize that and we have to answer the call. And so the work of getting sober, the work of taking care of our mental health is to be able to answer the call. And when masses of us do this, like trans folks, LGBTQ folks in general, when we begin to answer the call of the universe to love, to be of service, to love ourselves and each other in ways that are just so incredible and amazing, we're going to defeat all of this, right? But this moment, so there's that piece, right? To tap into the divine that is in us. This is a resource, right? It's waiting for everybody. It's inside of us. So this is a resource that we must tap into, and we can only really access it if we are doing the work on healing from our traumas, healing from our attachment issues, finding ways to be more self-compassionate, getting sober if we have to. Then it's incredible what's there, right? It may not be money, but it's a sense of well-being and peace of mind, right? And I think people need material resources. And then there's the work of changing the structures and the powers, right? That we need to get rid of that filibuster so we can actually have legal protection, so we can pass the Equality Act, so we can pass the PRO Act and get unions going, so we can pass voting rights. So these things need to happen as well, right? And so we need to be activists who are doing our mental health work and, tapped into the power of the universe that is inside of us and individually and collectively. And then we have to, got to get these politicians together, and it's a mess. It's a mess because of money and corruption. It really is. We got to get money out of politics. And so we just have to be real about that. And this is a moment, right? If we don't get rid of the filibuster and make some real changes on a federal level around the environment, around voting rights, around, LGBTQ rights, unions, money and politics. It can be very, very grim. Minority rule is what the Republican Party is trying to do. That's what these voting laws are about, right? There were all these that the former president is sued like 50 times saying that there was some voter corruption where there was none. Courts all over the country said these elections were fine, and yet they are passing all this hundreds of bills have been introduced trying to fix voting when there's no evidence that there's anything wrong with it. So we're at a crucial time, and so for me, having the clarity of that, but then the mental health piece is having some, what can I control today? What can I control today? Right? And as frustrating as it is, right? I can only take the next right action. And so it's frustrating and it's scary and it's all, what can I do today? And then the things that I can't control and the things I can't, do anything about, I have to let go of today, right? It doesn't mean we stop fighting. It doesn't mean that I'm giving up. It just means that I need to have some peace of mind and not drive myself crazy, because I have to, because my creator has me here for a reason, and I need to be able to show up for that reason in the best form possible.
What can I control today? I love that. I think that is an amazing little nugget for whoever's watching, and not only just in general about mental health, but sort of in everything, right? In the work that you're doing, it's even what can I control today? What can I control this hour? What can I control this minute? And sometimes what can I control in this very moment, in everything that is going on, particularly for so many of us, Black, and sometimes we have to get to that moment. So I appreciate you, and thank you for saying that as well.
Yeah,
for sure.
All we have is the moment, really, and there's something really beautiful about that. If we can really just get present, right? Just get present in this moment. It's sometimes, I mean, I do believe we have to heal past stuff, and but then sometimes it's just in just being present right now. This is all we really have.
and that breath work. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
I love a good breath, honey.
Laverne, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so very, very much. Oh my gosh, what a joy and a